It was uncomfortable, pretending to be Byron's latest girl. The impression prickled under Michael's skin enough that his hostility to Byron authenticated the rumor. It was perfect. Michael would never have agreed to it if 2 days after Irina had told him of Byron's offer and information on the FLF, Michael hadn't been called to speak to his supervisor, but not in the office. Instead, they met on an open runway at the airport, supposedly inspecting a potential security threat at the U.S. hangar. Michael had been distracted enough at the longing to fly again that he hadn't realized how quiet his supervisor had been, at least not until they were alone in an empty building and the major pulled a gun. The conversation had been brief and off the books. Otherwise, the gun would have been used. The thought unnerved Irina so much that she'd fretted for days afterwards whenever Michael was late or didn't check in. Michael's informal and thankfully not persistent questions regarding the FLF had gone back to the major, but no further. If Michael dropped the questioning and said where he'd heard the name, as well as anything else he'd learned of the group, the matter would be forgotten. In the half-year he'd been with the embassy, Michael had proved himself. It was what kept him alive that day. Michael lied. He protected Byron and instead said the FLF had been mentioned in the chatter he'd picked up from the Italian flyboys visiting the week before. Michael hung out with any pilot that flew through Madrid. It was believable and got him off the hook. It got him home to her. He was safe, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. He wouldn't talk about it. She'd never seen his faith in the military shaken before, and wasn't certain how to help him. Now the only source for information came through Byron, and the world he opened for her. The price was to pretend to enjoy it while being nothing more than the newest girl on Byron's arm. She wasn't certain who disliked the situation more, she or Michael. Byron loved it. But the information made the ruse worthwhile. For every late night out with Byron as they attended balls, clubs, or private dinners, Irina would stay up until dawn giving Michael information and assurances. The strain ate at her. But as unrest at home grew, and official information became more unrealistically bland, she and Michael both knew Byron was their best source. What she overheard in unguarded moments while staff drank wine, flirted, or complained was invaluable. So she continued while Spanish Spring changed to the heavy heat of summer. Irina's cell phone buzzed silently in her pocket. She pulled it out without checking the number. Only 2 people typically called her, and it was too early for Michael to be checking in.
"What are you wearing?"
Irina smiled at Byron's smooth voice as she pushed the report she was idly working on across her desk. "That is not your concern," she answered, but she laughed, undermining her cool tone.
I get to use my imagination then. Bueno.
"I do hope there is a reason you are calling," Irina said, cheeks hot. A new political officer, barely 2 days at the embassy, glanced over while the woman's trainer whispered to her. The new staffer's eyes grew wide. Such was the price of knowing Byron. Irina turned away from the snooping, too.
"Of course. I missed you and wanted to hear your voice. Which is why I managed to get us invited to the ball at the Brazilian embassy tonight."
"I see. And give me one good reason I should change my evening plans to go with you."
"Because there is someone there with news on the bombings,"
Byron said, the teasing gone from his voice. "Plural?" Irina asked, keeping her tone light. The new woman blushed scarlet.
"Yes. You'll come?"
"I can arrange it," Irina said, feeling breathless.
"Good. Wear something low-cut. The night is supposed to be warm, even for late July. Besides, you know how the Brazilians like a good display of skin."
"Not just the Brazilians, I think," she replied dryly. Byron was laughing when she hung up. Michael wasn't home when she needed to leave. She left a note wishing he could answer his phone, but personal calls were limited while he was on duty. When they spoke at work, it was in code and often stilted. At home, they barely saw each other with the time she spent gathering information. Byron picked her up, his black convertible spotless.
"Not home?"
Byron asked, glancing toward the house as he met Irina at the gate. She shook her head, the pressure of his hand on the small of her back deepened with the motion, edging her closer as they walked toward his car. "I didn't get a chance to tell him I'd be out," Irina said as Byron opened the door for her.
"Well, we'd better go before we need to explain,"
Byron said with a wink. Even though doing nothing wrong, he made her feel a tremble of illicitness. Byron's arm was around her waist again when he handed over the invitation. She leaned against his chest, feeling his warmth through a fine shirt. In the summer heat, the fabric of clothing created what felt like an ephemeral barrier over skin.
"I almost wish they'd refuse to let us in. We'd have to find another way to spend the night,"
Byron whispered in her ear. "Yes, I could spend some time with my husband for once," Irina replied. Byron let out a puff of breath.
Well, we are all out of luck, I guess,
Byron said as they were waved in. Irina had become an expert in pretending to drink. Byron kept her distracted and laughing enough to appear tipsy. The rest of the act required carrying a half-empty glass and occasionally raising it to her lips. Sometimes she simply filled her wine glass with water. Together she and Byron danced, chatted, and waited. The times before had taught her that information came after the first 2 hours. The best came after at least 3. This time, though, the informant was as sober as her and wouldn't talk.